Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
As the federal government takes on more financial risk, a GAO review of government-wide grants management points to staffing limits, data mismatches, and unclear rules that complicate how funds are awarded and overseen. The findings suggest persistent operational challenges that accounting fixes alone haven't solved. Jeff Arkin is Director of Strategic Issues at the Government Accountability Office. Jeff, thanks so much for joining me. It's great to have you back.
Thanks, Terry. Great to be back.
We're going to talk about grants management today. That has been a perennial topic in GAO reports. You've looked at it across administrations, across various crises, and you've got a recent report out, again, looking at the challenges in grants management. So before we dig into what you found in this particular report, let's talk first about what makes federal grants management so complex to start with. Set the stage for us.
Sure. I think there's a couple things in play here. When we talk about grants management across the federal government, we're talking about dozens of agencies that are managing over 1,000 different grants programs. They have different goals. They're trying to provide money to different types of recipients. And so there's just a ton of moving parts. And the other aspect of it is there are a lot of requirements that agencies are supposed to follow. You have federal laws, you have regulations, you have guidance from the Office of Management and Budget, and then you have agency policies and requirements that they have to follow. So just a lot that the agencies have to take into account.
And the report notes that the federal government issued $1.2 trillion in grants in 2024. It's more than the rest of the appropriations budget put together.
Right.
So you can't put it all in one little box.
That's right. Yeah, it is a lot of money. It's, in some years, it's getting close to 20% of federal spending. And that's something that maybe we don't think about, that it's a large amount of money and it's going through agencies that they are then providing to recipients, whether it's states or localities, universities, nonprofit organizations, to really implement policies and to implement the goals that we are trying to achieve as a federal government.
When we at the federal government have tried to reform grants management, it seems like we try to take a financial approach to this, solve it as an accounting problem. But your report really points out that there are a lot of operational issues that have to be addressed. So is the government asking the wrong question about grants management? Are we looking in the wrong place?
Yeah, I think I agree that it really is an operations challenge. Certainly there are financial or accounting measures that have to take in place. But these are, grants are things where there's a lot that the agency have to take into account. They have to make sure that the grants are and the grantees are consistent with the law, that the entities that are receiving the funds are the ones that should be receiving the funds. They have to go through a selection process with grants that are what we call discretionary in nature or competitive grants. They need to make sure that there are or try to mitigate any sort of improper payments or fraud. And so there are a ton of operational challenges that agencies really have to be mindful of and try to mitigate as they implement the grants management process.
Maybe one of the biggest operational challenges there is staffing, and your report highlights shortages in trained grant personnel and really uneven experience across agencies, perhaps made even worse by the personnel transitions of the last year. When you looked across the system, did you get a sense that much of it was being held together by individual expertise rather than repeatable processes?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. Agencies, they certainly have processes that are in place. Some longstanding agencies do change their processes. And again, this is to comply with the various laws and requirements and regulations. But it's really important that agencies ensure that their staff have the skills to administer and oversee grant programs. And a big way of doing that is through the training aspect. In the past, we've found examples where agencies can improve how they manage and train their grants workforce. Issues as simple as really having an understanding of who all the people are at your agencies who work on grants to make sure that they receive training, and also challenges with evaluating training, making sure that the training is effective and helping the individuals achieve the goals of the agencies and ultimately of the statutory purposes for having that grant program in the first place.
Speaking with Jeff Arkin, he's Director of Strategic Issues at GAO. Jeff, the report then ultimately focuses on government-wide collaboration, and it talks a lot about the Council on Federal Financial Assistance, or COFA. How is that organization working these days?
So the COFA is the most recent of many efforts that the federal government has had to collaborate on grants, to enable the various agencies that issue grants to come together, share best practices, tackle challenges that affect all agencies. It's only been around for a couple of years now, so it's getting started. But we're hopeful and certainly think that efforts like this are important. We are hopeful that it'll help address some of these challenges, and it's really was established to improve coordination, transparency, and accountability of federal grants, to have strategic direction across the government, make policy recommendations, set priorities for government-wide grants-related activities. And from what we found so far, again, it's just getting started, but we had some good input from agencies on how it's working, how it's been able to collectively address or provide input on guidance that the Office of Management and Budget is putting out. And it'll be an interesting issue or topic to watch in the coming years to see really how effective it can be.
One of the purposes of COFA is a shared forum for lessons learned. Has that survived the administration's transition?
I think what we have seen that the COFA is still operating, and they tend to meet. You have one representative from each of the what we call the CFO Act agencies that attend this. You have a representative that serves or represents rather the views of some of the smaller agencies. And they have continued to meet. They have continued to discuss lessons learned. We don't go to the meetings ourselves, but we have seen a number of the information or seminars, webcasts, or whatever that come out through this. And I will say that this effort is being led both by the Office of Management and Budget and the Department for Health and Human Services as the largest grant-making agency in the federal government. And so the input we've got from HHS in particular, I think indicates that things are moving forward.
One of the other issues that GAO often surfaces in its reports is incentives. Are programs structured with the right incentives for compliance and improvement? When you think about grants management, are there the right incentives for agencies to slow down and coordinate, or is it more of a pressure to get funds out the door and that collaboration and coordination comes later?
Yeah, again, this may be an answer where it's a little bit of both. And I think we saw during the response to the COVID pandemic, for example, a desire to get money out quickly. And there are programs where there is expectations of when money goes out. Let's say, as an example, programs for educational institutions, just K through 12 schools, where there's a cycle of when the school year happens. And so getting money when the school year is halfway through maybe isn't as helpful as right away. So there are those pressures for sure. But what I think one would hope to see is the structures in place well ahead of time to be able to manage those programs and check all the boxes that the agencies need to check in terms of requirements, but also making sure the money's going to the right place and to those that are best suited to receive it.
The Trump administration has made the prosecution of waste and fraud in benefits programs and grants programs a key part of its agenda. You mentioned upfront the variety of structures of grants programs. Do you see here a tension between trying to make grants programs easy to access for the grantees versus putting the overhead in place, the compliance processes in place to prevent waste, fraud, and abuse?
Yeah, I think that question to me really hits on the greatest challenge, or one of the greatest challenges with grants management, that tension between oversight and burden. You could have a federal employee or grants manager sitting in every institution that receives the grant to make sure everything is going according to plan, but obviously that comes with a huge cost and is quite burdensome. You could just send the money out and not worry about where it goes, but that opens up great opportunities for fraud. And so I think the trick is really finding the balance between those two. How can we have processes that identifies fraud, up front and make sure that the money doesn't go to entities that shouldn't be receiving it. Make sure the agencies have processes in place to manage fraud and manage the risk of fraud, I should say. But also that we have processes that allow recipients to focus on the main purpose of a grant, which is to achieve the outcome that the government has said we want to achieve. But again, it is a difficult balance to hit.
In the near term, where do you think the best opportunities are to reform grants management to have better outcomes, but also better management?
One thing where we've seen a lot of activities is in the kind of the upfront part of it, what we call the notice of funding opportunity. That's what agencies put out to indicate we have this grant program, there's a certain amount of money available, we want to achieve this goal. In the past, those have been somewhat complicated to look through. And so a large entity like a state may have dozens of people working on grants, and they know the drill, and they know how to look at the funding opportunity and write a grant proposal. Whereas smaller entities that don't have those resources may struggle for that. And so I think we have seen a lot of attention to not level the playing field necessarily, but to make it easier and more viable for those less resourced entities to be able to compete for grants at the same scale as a larger, better resourced entity.
Well, I'm sure that you will continue to look into this, and there will be plenty of other reports to come.
Indeed.
I've been speaking with Jeff Arkin, Director of Strategic Issues at GAO. Jeff, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, Terry. Always a pleasure.
We'll post this interview and a link to the report at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.